A stranger appeared in every childhood photo. The truth changed my life. Reddit stories. They say every family has secrets, but mine wasn't so much built on secrets as it was cemented by silence. The kind of silence that hangs like a mist over everything, making even the most colorful memories look gray. You'd never guess it by looking at us. We were the kind of family that posed well for pictures. Mother's pearl necklace catching just the right light, father's hand resting on my shoulder like a badge of honor, and my sister, always standing with her tilted smile that made her look like she knew something the rest of us didn't. But the truth, we never took a real photograph. Not one that told the whole story. Not one that would have captured the way my mother's hands trembled just after my father left the room. Or the way my sister would flinch when the door slammed too loudly, no matter who did it. Or how I'd lie in bed at night, tracing cracks in the ceiling, trying to find the pattern that would explain everything. Back then, I thought love was what you saw on TV, a neat, digestible package of hugs and well-timed apologies. But in our house, love was quieter. It was in the way Dad would come home late from work and leave a warm meat pie in the oven for us, even though we'd already eaten. Or how Mom, who never spoke much, would sit on the edge of my bed and hum lullabies in Polish when she thought I was asleep. It was strange, the way we orbited each other like planets. Gravitationally bound but emotionally distant, each of us playing roles like it was a family play that never ended. My father was the dependable one, strong, upright, with eyes that saw too much and a mouth that said too little. My mother, an enigma carved out of worry and grace. My sister, clever and sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. And me, I was the observer, the one who watched, cataloged, remembered. I remember one Sunday morning in particular. It stands out because nothing actually happened. That's the thing about memory. It doesn't just cling to the dramatic moments. Sometimes it latches onto the absences. We were at the kitchen table, a simple breakfast of toast and jam. The sun pouring through the window like warm syrup. Dad was reading the paper. Mom was knitting something, probably a scarf she'd never wear. And my sister was sketching tiny doodles in the margins of her math homework. I wanted to say something, anything, just to break the silence, but I didn't. I never did. None of us did. That silence was sacred. It was the glue. As I got older, I started to notice the patterns. The way Dad always hesitated before unlocking the front door, as though he had to brace himself for the atmosphere inside. Or the way Mom would vanish into the garden whenever things got tense, crouching among the lavender and basil like she was hiding from something. My sister began spending more time at her best friend's house, coming home with stories that always felt a little too polished, like she was trying to convince herself of something. And me, I started collecting moments. Not photographs, just memories, snapshots in my head. The time Mom cut her finger while slicing apples and didn't even flinch. The way Dad looked when he thought no one was watching, staring at the fireplace like it had spoken to him in a voice only he could hear. The silence between all of us growing heavier with every passing year, like dust on an unused piano. High school came and went in a blur of test scores and yearbook signatures. I remember graduation day because it rained. My cap got soggy and my robe stuck to my skin. But what I remember most is the way my parents clapped. Not too loud, not too proud, just enough, like they were checking a box. Afterward, we went to dinner, and my sister picked at her food while Mom kept looking at the door, and Dad told me he was proud of me but never met my eyes. That night, I stared at the ceiling again, older now but still tracing cracks, still searching. Years passed. I moved away not far, just enough to breathe. I got a job in a city where no one knew my last name. My apartment was small, but it was mine. I started filling it with things my childhood home never had. Houseplants, candid photos, music that played even when no one was listening. I dated people who spoke their minds, who shouted when they were angry and cried when they were hurt. It was terrifying at first, like stepping off a cliff and realizing halfway down you've never actually learned how to fly. But it was also freeing. Every once in a while, I'd get a call from my sister. She stayed close to home, got married young, had kids. She sounded happy, but there was always something in her voice, an echo, a hesitation. We never talked about the past. It was like a burned-down house we could both still smell but refuse to look at. Mom and Dad got older. They shrank, like clothes left in the dryer too long. Dad's hair turned white almost overnight, and Mom stopped knitting altogether. One day, my sister called to say Dad had been diagnosed with something terminal. She said it like she was reading it off a grocery list. I didn't know what to say. I hung up and stared at the walls of my apartment, which suddenly felt too narrow, too clean. I visited him. Of course I did. He was thinner than I remembered, a skeleton wrapped in hospital linens. He looked at me like he was trying to place me. "You're taller," he said finally, and I laughed, even though I hadn't grown an inch since 17. Mom was there too, sitting by his bedside, knitting again. Some half-finished shape in a mustard-colored yarn. My sister hovered by the door like she might bolt any second. We didn't say much. We never did. But in that room, something shifted. Maybe it was the way the afternoon light caught Mom's hair and made it look gold again, or the way Dad squeezed my hand with what little strength he had. Maybe it was the way my sister finally looked at me. Not past me, not through me, but at me. After he died, we went through the motions. Funeral, condolences, casseroles from neighbors who barely knew us. I found a box in the attic filled with undeveloped film rolls. Dozens of them. Some labeled in Dad's handwriting. Christmas 1992, on his 10th birthday. Backyard BBQ. We had never seen these photos. He'd taken them, but for some reason, never developed them. I took them with me, got them processed. It was like opening a time capsule. There we were, laughing, playing, hugging. Moments I didn't even remember happening. Dad behind the lens, silent, invisible, documenting a life we were too busy living, or surviving, to notice. That's when it hit me. We weren't broken. We were just unfinished. Like those photos, waiting in darkness to be revealed. I started printing them, framing them, filling the walls of my apartment with proof that love had existed. Even if it was quiet, even if it was flawed, and somewhere between the grainy photo of my sister with cake on her nose and the blurry one of Mom planting tomatoes, I found a picture of Meek. 7 years old, eyes wide, mouth open mid-laugh, caught off guard, unposed, unaware, real. That was the photograph we never took, the one I never knew I needed, and it changed everything. That photograph haunted me. Not in a chilling way, but in the kind that follows you silently, like the scent of your childhood home that you can't quite name, but instantly recognize. I kept it on the wall above my desk, in a thin wooden frame that reminded me of the ones Dad used to make in the garage, hands always dusty with sawdust and the faint smell of varnish. At first, I'd stare at it just to study the detail. My own face, frozen mid-laugh, like I didn't yet know what silence was, like joy still came naturally. But over time, that photo became less about me and more about him. About the fact that he saw me like that, happy, unguarded, and chose to preserve that moment even if he never showed it to anyone. Why didn't he develop the photos? Why keep them locked away in the attic like secrets wrapped in celluloid? I started going through them more methodically, each roll of film a new revelation. Some shots were crooked or overexposed, others oddly framed. An empty hallway, a plate of half-eaten pierogi, the back of someone's head. But even those images felt intentional, like puzzle pieces from a version of our lives I'd never seen. In one photo, Mom is dancing barefoot in the kitchen, her hair falling from its usual bun, eyes closed, arms above her head. Dad must have taken it quietly, capturing her mid-spin. She looked free. Unburdened, I couldn't stop staring at it. That was not the woman I remembered. That woman had disappeared long before Dad ever got sick. Eventually, I made copies and sent them to my sister. No note, just the images. She didn't reply for days, and when she did, it was a single text. I forgot we were like that. So had I. But the photos made it harder to keep pretending that we had always been trapped in that silence. That everything was cold and measured. We were happy once. Or maybe we were always pretending we were, and the pretending itself became its own kind of happiness. Not long after, my sister invited me over. We hadn't sat in the same room for more than 20 minutes since the funeral. Her house was neat, structured, with every cushion fluffed and every surface spotless. The kind of order that screams of chaos being held at bay. Her 2 boys were asleep upstairs. Her husband was away on business. Just the 2 of us, 2 adult siblings orbiting a shared past like moons around a dying planet. She had the photos laid out on the table. All of them. She'd arranged them chronologically, like evidence at a trial. She pointed at one. "Remember this. You had chickenpox and were furious because you couldn't go trick-or-treating." I laughed. Then she pointed at another. Our father, leaning against the old brick, arms crossed, sunlight making his hair glow like copper. He used to take us for ice cream after those long drives, remember? Mom never wanted to come. I did remember. But I also remembered the quiet tension that always followed. The long silences in the car, the way Dad would tap his fingers on the steering wheel like he was counting seconds until it was safe to speak. We kept going, image by image, building a timeline of things we'd never talked about. And somewhere in the middle of it, she looked up and said, "Do you think he knew?" I didn't need to ask what she meant. She was talking about Mom. About the afternoons when she'd disappear for hours, claiming to be at the market but coming back with nothing but a faint perfume none of us wore. About the garden she tended with a religious fervor, sometimes digging for hours like she was burying something more than seeds. About the letters I found once, shoved behind the radiator. Pages and pages in looping cursive, unsigned, unaddressed, full of longing. I shrugged. Maybe he did. Maybe that's why he started taking the photos. She nodded slowly like she'd already thought of that 100 times. We didn't speak for a while after that. Just sat there, listening to the soft ticking of the wall clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator. For a moment, I saw her not as my sister, but as another version of Meek. Someone who'd spent years carrying the weight of our family's silence, and was only now realizing it didn't have to be carried alone. A week later, I went back to the house, the one we grew up in. It was still empty, still quiet, like it had been holding its breath for years. My sister and I had decided to sell it, but I needed to walk through it one last time. Alone. The hallway still smelled like wax polish. The living room carpet had a faint stain where I once spilled grape juice and tried to cover it with a rug. The stairs creaked in all the same places. I ended up in the attic again, dust motes floating in the sunlight like tiny ghosts. I stood there for a while, staring at the space where the box of film used to be, trying to remember if there was anything I missed. And then I noticed the floorboard, slightly raised, loose. I pried it up, heart pounding. Not because I expected treasure, because I'd grown used to finding truths in hidden places. Inside there was a small metal tin. Inside the tin, more film rolls. But these were different, unlabeled, older. Some even brittle with age. I took them with me. It took time to find a lab that could process them without damaging them. When I finally got the photos back, I sat on my couch and went through them slowly, carefully. And that's when I found it. The photograph we definitely never took. A picture of Mom and a man who wasn't Dad. They were sitting under the apple tree in our backyard, legs tangled, faces close, laughing. He looked familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. A neighbor, a friend, whoever he was, the moment was intimate. Unmistakably so. There were more. Snaps of them walking down the street, holding hands. Another of him in our kitchen, pouring coffee into a mug that said "World's Best Dad." The timestamps were clear. Early 90s. I was maybe 6. Dad had been there. He'd taken some of those photos. They weren't hidden mistakes. They were deliberate. I felt the ground shift under me. All this time, I'd assumed Dad didn't know, that he'd lived and died wrapped in the same silence we all were. But this changed everything. He had known. And not only that, he'd documented it. He had watched the quiet unraveling of his marriage and captured it frame by frame, not out of spite, but out of something far more complex. Maybe grief, maybe resignation, or maybe love, the kind that knows it's slipping away and chooses to preserve the goodbye. I didn't tell my sister. Not yet. I didn't know how. What would it change? We had finally started to stitch something together from the fragments. This truth would rip it open again. So instead, I did something unexpected. I framed one of the photos, the one under the apple tree, and I placed it next to the picture of me laughing, because they belonged together, two halves of a whole story, love in all its fractured forms. That night, I sat at my desk and began writing down everything, not just the facts, but the feelings, the silences, the glances, the unsaid things that filled our house like ghosts. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Maybe a memoir, maybe just a journal. But it felt necessary. Like maybe if I told the story in full, the weight of it would finally lift. But something still nagged at me. A thread I hadn't pulled, because there was one more photo buried at the bottom of the stack. And when I looked closer, really looked, my blood ran cold. It was a picture of me older. Much older than 6, maybe 13, sitting in the garden, reading. And behind me, barely visible in the shadows, was the same man. The one from the apple tree, watching. But that couldn't be right. I didn't remember him ever being there. And Dad wouldn't have taken that photo. It wasn't his style. It was too candid, too distant. The angle was off, like it had been taken from behind a bush. My hands shook. I flipped it over. No date. No label. And suddenly, I wasn't sure what the story really was anymore. Or who had been telling it all along. The photo stayed on my desk for weeks. I tried ignoring it, but that proved impossible. It was like it stared back at me. Like the man in the shadow knew something I didn't. I examined every pixel, every inch, trying to make sense of how I had never noticed him. I even tried convincing myself it was a trick of the light, a stranger, a cousin, a neighbor's boyfriend caught accidentally in frame. But deep down, I knew better. That wasn't someone who wandered into the shot. He was watching, intentionally. And what shook me more than anything was that I didn't recognize the setting. It wasn't the usual backyard angle Dad would use. The perspective was odd. It wasn't taken by any of us. That photograph came from somewhere else. Someone else. I went back through the rest of the undeveloped photos. I couldn't help myself. I was looking now, scanning backgrounds like a detective combing through evidence. And I found him again, in the background of a Christmas morning photo. Blurred, outside the living room window, a shadow behind the frost-glazed glass. In a beach picture, Mom, my sister, and I building a sand castle, and far back, just along the dunes, a man with his hands in his pockets, facing us. Always just there, on the edge, present, but never acknowledged. It made my skin crawl. I called the lab that processed the photos, asked if there was any way someone else could have taken them, maybe spliced in, altered somehow. But the technician said no. They were all from the same batch, developed straight from vintage 35 negatives. Authentic, unedited. And yet this man, this constant presence, had somehow slipped through our lives without any of us ever remembering him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake with the photo clutched in my hand, eyes darting to the shadows in my apartment, wondering how many other things I'd missed in my life. How many eyes had been watching, just out of frame. I even dreamed of him. In the dream, I was a child again, sitting under the apple tree, the sun warm on my back. He stood at a distance, smiling, not sinister, just knowing, like he was waiting. And then he raised a camera. Click. I woke up drenched in sweat. I couldn't talk to my sister about it. Not yet. Not when we had just started to rebuild trust. She wouldn't believe me anyway. She'd say I was chasing ghosts. Maybe I was. But I couldn't stop. I pulled out the shoebox of loose photos I'd never sorted through. Duplicates, rejects, accidental shots. And there, in the middle of a pile of discarded images, was another photo I'd never seen. This time, it was clearer. Him again, sitting at the kitchen table. Alone, looking straight at the camera. I dropped it. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't someone captured by chance. He had been in our home, sitting at our table, and someone had taken that photo. But it couldn't have been Dad. It was his camera, yes, but Dad never allowed anyone else to use it. He kept it in a locked drawer in the garage with his tools and cigar box. And yet, here it was, proof that someone else had access, or maybe Dad had taken himself. But why? I knew what I had to do. I had to go back to the house. It hadn't sold yet. My sister was dragging her feet with the paperwork. I told her I needed to pick up a few more things. Some of Dad's journals, maybe a few tools. She didn't ask questions. I didn't offer answers. The house felt different this time, heavier, like it knew I was close to something. I walked straight to the garage, that narrow, smelling space where time seemed to have frozen. Dad's workbench was untouched, his tools still hanging in perfect alignment. I found the locked drawer, the one with the camera. The key had always been under a loose floor tile by the water heater. I pried it open and lifted the camera, still cold, still smelling faintly of oil and dust. But there was more. Behind the camera, tucked away beneath a stack of unused negatives, was a notebook. Plain black cover. No label. I opened it. Inside, Dad's handwriting, rigid, sharp. But it wasn't a diary. Not exactly. It was notes, observations, dates, times, and every entry mentioned him. Prilpert saw him again. Back by the garden gate, didn't speak. Just watched. Same coat, a June 12th. He was in the shed. Thought I heard him whisper my name. No sign of break-in. Told no one. December 1st. Caught him in the house. He didn't run, just stared, took a picture, needed to prove it. I felt my hands trembling as I turned the pages. The entries went back years. All through the 90s. Sporadic at first, then more frequent. Increasingly paranoid. Anna doesn't see him, or pretends not to. Maybe I'm the only one who can. I think he's always been here, watching, recording, waiting for something. I clutched the notebook, heart pounding in my ears. Was Dad losing his mind? Had the sickness started long before we ever noticed? Or was there something more to this? I found more photos in the garage, an entire box I hadn't seen before. All of them marked, "Do not share." More images of the man, in our house, at my school, at the grocery store, always just behind, always unnoticed. One photo made me stop breathing. It was of me asleep in bed, taken from inside the room, a figure barely visible in the mirror's reflection. Him, the man, his eyes locked on the lens. That's when I realized I wasn't looking at a stranger anymore. I'd seen that face before, not in person. In old family albums, in one of the oldest pictures of Mom long before she married Dad. A college photo. She was laughing, holding a drink, arm wrapped around someone. Him. It wasn't just someone watching. It wasn't random. He had known her. I rushed home, digging through everything I had, every clue. The letters, the photographs, Dad's notes. I pieced it together like a forensic map. The timelines overlapped. The man started appearing right after I was born. He wasn't just part of the past. He inserted himself into our lives, quietly, repeatedly. Always on the edge, always in the frame, like an echo trying to become real. Then I remembered something else. Something that had always seemed strange but never questioned. My birth certificate. It had been reissued when I was 8. I had asked why, and Mom said there was a paperwork error. But I never saw the original. That night, I tore through my files, finally finding it at the bottom of a folder labeled Medical. The name of the father field was blank. I sat there, air caught in my chest. My mind raced back to the photo. The one in the garden, the man watching me read. To Dad's scribbled notes, to the photo of the man in our kitchen. And for the first time, I saw the pattern. He wasn't just watching out of obsession. He was watching me. All those years, we thought we were a quiet, broken family. But we weren't broken. We were split, divided by an invisible line between the man who raised me and the man who watched from afar. And now, I wasn't sure which one of them I really came from. The revelation didn't hit me like an explosion. It was quieter than that. More like a slow leak from a pipe hidden in the walls, steady, insidious. Impossible to ignore once you noticed the damage. I couldn't stop looking at that birth certificate, couldn't stop seeing the empty space where a name should have been. The field left blank, like someone had purposely made room for a secret to grow. And maybe that's exactly what it had done. The man in the photographs, the one I had seen hovering at the edges of my childhood, he hadn't just appeared. He'd been seated there, like a ghost waiting for his cue to cross the stage. The questions multiplied in my head faster than I could hold them. Who was he really? Why had my mother never spoken of him? Why had my father stayed silent all those years, quietly taking pictures of a man who haunted our lives like a shadow cast by a candle no one remembered lighting? But most importantly, why now? Why was I only finding all of this now, after both of them were gone? I couldn't ask Mom. She had passed a year before Dad, her body worn down by an illness that consumed her like pages in a fire. At the time, I thought her final silence was just part of her nature, the last chapter in a book that had never used many words to begin with. But now, I started to wonder if her quiet was something else entirely. Fear, regret, guilt. There had always been something about her grief that didn't fit the shape of our loss. I thought she had mourned my father, but maybe she had mourned something deeper. Or someone else. I found myself obsessed with the man. I began calling him the Watcher, not because I thought he was dangerous, but because I needed to name him somehow, to contain him in language when nothing else about him could be contained. I pinned all the photographs to a board in my apartment, connecting them with threads like a conspiracy theorist unraveling a decades-long mystery. The Watcher at the beach, the Watcher at the window, the Watcher in the kitchen, the Watcher in my dreams. I played out every possibility in my head. A stalker, an old flame, a hallucination, a twin brother of my father who was cast out. None of it fit. Then I remembered the letters, the ones I'd found behind the radiator years ago. At the time, they were just poetic nonsense, unaddressed ramblings. But now, they seemed like a puzzle I had dismissed too quickly. I went to my storage unit and retrieved the shoebox, brushing off the dust. The letters were still there, paper yellowed with age, ink faded but legible. I started reading them aloud, one by one. The handwriting didn't match my mother's. It was looser, more fluid, emotional in a way she never was allowed. I still dream of the summer light on your face, of the way you said my name like it was a promise you hadn't decided to keep yet. He doesn't know. I see it in his eyes. He suspects, but he's too proud to ask, too loyal to confront. I watched him hold her hand today. Our daughter. She doesn't know me, but I know every inch of her smile. It's yours. My blood ran cold. They weren't from my mother. They were to my mother. From him, the Watcher. They weren't unsent. They were unreturned. Love letters buried like bodies behind the walls of our home, too dangerous to destroy, too painful to acknowledge. And in the middle of the stack was one letter dated just 3 months before I was born. If you choose him, I will disappear. Not from the world, but from her life. You'll never see me again, I promise. But know this, I will never stop watching. Not out of malice, but because I have to know she's safe. I have to know she is loved, even if not by me. I collapsed onto the floor, letter clutched in my hand. The truth unfolded before me, horrible and delicate. He was my biological father, not Dad. Not the man who taught me how to tie my shoes, who walked me to school, who sat through every awkward school recital without complaint. That man was my father. But the Watcher, the man behind the photos, behind the silence, he was the one whose blood ran in my veins, and he had kept his promise. He had vanished from our lives, never trying to take anything, never demanding to be known. He had simply watched. But why start leaving traces now? Why let me find him now? I couldn't get the image out of my mind, of a man who had walked alone through his daughter's life, watching from alleys and window frames, photographing birthdays he didn't attend, graduations he was barred from, always distant, always hidden. Until now. My phone buzzed. A message from my sister. You need to come over. I found something in Mom's jewelry box. I think it's about you. My heart tightened. I drove over immediately, the city passing in a blur. When I arrived, she was pale, holding a small envelope. No address. Just my name written in Mom's precise, careful handwriting. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd once sorted the old family photos. My fingers trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph. It was me again, maybe 4 years old, asleep on the couch with a book open on my chest. On the back, a note taken by M. He asked me not to tell you. Said he wanted one moment to keep for himself. I let him have this one. Just one. But there was no signature. Justin, my mother's first initial. I couldn't stop crying. Not loud sobs, just silent tears that streamed down like a storm I'd carried too long. My sister sat across from me, unsure, scared to ask. I handed her the letter from the shoebox. She read it in silence. When she finished, she looked up and said, "So, we're not the family we thought we were." I shook my head. No, we're not. But that didn't mean we weren't still a family. That was the strangest, most complicated part of all. Dad had raised me knowing I wasn't his by blood. He had protected me, loved me, never once treated me differently. That kind of love, that's real, that's chosen. But so was the other kind, the love that watched from afar, that respected the boundary, that sacrificed everything just to be a silent witness. I suddenly felt like I had two fathers, one who stood beside me and one who stood behind me. And now I had a choice. To keep the truth buried, like the letters had been. Or to find the man, if he was still alive. Ask him why he never tried. Ask him why now. I looked at my sister. Do you think I should try to find him? She paused, then nodded. You deserve to know. He's part of you. And maybe you're the part of him he never stopped missing. That night I began searching. I had no name, just a handful of photos, letters, and shadows. But something told me he had left more behind than just images. Something told me the Watcher had always intended for me to find him. When I was ready. And I was. I began the search with only fragments, a dozen photographs where he hovered like a ghost, a stack of letters written in ink that had started to fade, and the heavy knowledge that every minute of my childhood had been lived under a second father's watchful, invisible gaze. It felt absurd to even try to find him. I didn't know his full name. I didn't have an address. There were no records, no fingerprints. Just memories I didn't know were his and shadows captured in film. And yet, I couldn't stop. I was tethered to this mystery now, pulled forward by something older than curiosity. Something like instinct. I started with the photos. Some of them, like the beach picture and the one in the kitchen, had clear backgrounds. I uploaded them to an old facial recognition site, hoping it could match him to a public record, a yearbook, anything. The system flagged one result, a college alumni newsletter from 1981. I clicked, heart pounding. There was younger wearing the same haunted eyes. His name was listed as Michael R. Anton, graduated with a degree in photography. There was a brief blurb underneath. Michael now works as a freelance photojournalist, often disappearing for months on remote assignments. When he's not chasing stories, he can be found tending to his rooftop garden in the city. It wasn't much, but it was something. A name, a place. Proof that he wasn't a figment, not a hallucination buried in old film. He was real, flesh and blood, and he had left breadcrumbs. I found a listing online, a photography portfolio under the same name. Sparse, minimal, but beautiful. Images of deserts, war zones, forgotten towns. None of people, none of children. It was as if he only photographed things that couldn't turn and look back at him. But there was an email address buried at the bottom of the site. I copied it, opened a new draft, and stared at the blinking cursor for what felt like hours. What do you say to a man who has watched your entire life but never once stepped forward? What do you ask someone who never sent a card, never knocked on your door, but was always there, and just beyond the edges? I wrote a subject, I think you knew my mother. Body, I found the photos. I found the letters. I believe you knew my mother, Anna. I believe you were at the apple tree. I believe you were at my school. I believe you've seen me grow up. If I'm wrong, tell me. If I'm right, please meet me. You know who I am. I think I deserve to know who you are. I signed only my first name, then I hit send. And waited. 2 days passed. Then 5. I checked the inbox obsessively, refreshing it until the skin on my fingers tingled from tension. Nothing. I started to wonder if the address was outdated, if Michael Anton had moved on, if maybe he was dead. Or worse, maybe he had received it and chosen silence again. Maybe that was the only language he ever truly spoke. But then, on the 7th day, an email appeared. Subject: I've been waiting for this. Body: yes. I knew her. I knew you. I have only one condition. Come alone. No one else. I'll be at the observatory outside Glenford, Saturday at 5 p.m. early. Don't be late. I stared at the screen. The observatory was an hour outside the city. Remote. A place for watching the stars, not confronting the past. And yet, somehow, it made sense. Of course that's where he'd be. Where the sky stretched out like undeveloped film and silence was built into the architecture. I told no one. Not my sister. Not my friends. Some part of me knew this had to be mine alone. I left early that Saturday, heart hammering in my chest, the kind of rhythm that makes you question whether you're alive or dreaming. The drive was long and winding. The observatory sat on a hill, aged and weathered, its dome silhouetted against a sky streaked with the approaching dusk. I parked and walked up the gravel path, each step heavier than the last. He was already there, sitting on the stone bench near the entrance, wearing a gray coat I recognized from a photo taken 2 decades ago. His hair was mostly white now, longish, swept back. His face was lined but familiar, the same eyes. And when he looked up at me, it was like looking into a mirror of the man I might one day become. My breath caught. I didn't speak. Neither did he. Not at first. Finally, he nodded. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure you'd answer. I replied, surprised by how steady my voice was. He smiled, just barely. You have questions? Too many, I said. He motioned for me to sit beside him. I hesitated, then did. The stone was cold. The silence between us was sharp. I wanted to tell you, he said. So many times. But I made a promise. He nodded. Your mother asked me to stay away, not just for your father's sake, but for yours. She said children needed stability, not confusion. She said love wasn't enough to justify chaos. I didn't respond. The wind rustled through the trees. A bird called once and then went silent again. I watched you grow up through a lens, he continued. Not out of obsession, out of longing. I wanted to know you, but I respected her wishes. But you left clues, I said. The photos, the letters. You wanted to be found. And he looked at me, and his eyes were wet. I knew one day you might start asking questions, and I didn't want you to feel like you'd imagined it all, like I never existed. You took photos of me. Of us, from inside the house. He nodded slowly. I visited once, when you were 4. Your mom let me in for 10 minutes while your dad was at work. I held you. You fell asleep on my chest. She took the picture. Said I could have one moment. I tried to picture it. My small body resting against the chest of a man I'd never met. A man whose arms still remembered the shape of a child who never knew they were being held by blood. You were at my school, I said. I was careful, he said. I stayed back. I never wanted to frighten you. I just needed to know you were okay. Tears threatened again, but I blinked them away. What didn't you fight for me? He sighed, a deep and ancient sound. Because I wasn't the better man. Your father was. He raised you. He gave you a name, a home. I gave you absence and love from afar. That's all I had. I looked up at the observatory dome, stars starting to pierce through the dusk like pinholes in paper. You left a hole in me. I know, he said, but I didn't want to rip open a bigger one. We sat there for a long time, 2 men tethered by blood and silence, staring at the sky as if the answers might be written in constellations. Eventually, I asked the only question that mattered. Do you regret it? He looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time, I saw the full weight of a man who had lived in the margins of his own life. Every single day hug. We didn't cry. We didn't make any promises. But when I left, he handed me something wrapped in cloth. I didn't open it until I got home. Inside was a camera, old, familiar, the same model my father used, and inside it a roll of undeveloped film. There was a note tucked under the lens. The last photos I ever took of you. Develop them only when you're ready to see who you were and who I was becoming. I stared at the camera for a long time, and I realized something. Some stories don't end, they wait. They wait for you to be brave enough to finish them. And I was almost ready, almost. The camera sat on my desk like a time bomb. Not a ticking one, but silent and still. The kind that waits for the moment when you're no longer afraid to see what happens when the past explodes into the present. I didn't touch it for days. I left it wrapped in that worn cloth, the way Michael had handed it to me, like it was sacred or cursed, maybe both. Every time I passed by, I felt its weight, not physical but emotional, gravitational. A relic not just of him, but of who I had been, of what had been hidden, of what might finally, after decades, come into focus. I kept thinking about what he said, about the moment he held me, the one photo my mother let him have. It had haunted me since that meeting. Not just the content of it, but the implications. My mother had once said yes to him. Not just in some romantic, faraway past, but quietly, amidst the life she had chosen with my father. She had opened the door. Let him hold me. Let him photograph me. A moment borrowed from a life he was never allowed to live. That wasn't nothing. But what was on this last roll of film? Why leave it for me? Why now? I didn't want to open it alone. I couldn't. There was only one person who could sit with me through this. My sister, the only person who had lived through the same silence. She didn't know I'd met him. Not yet. I hadn't known how to tell her. I wasn't even sure how to tell myself. But when I called and asked her to come over to help me develop the final photos, she didn't hesitate. "I'll bring wine," she said. "We might need it." But she arrived at dusk, carrying a bottle of something expensive she'd been saving for a special occasion. "Huh? You look like you haven't slept," she said, setting it down without looking at me too closely. "I haven't," I admitted. There's something you should know before we do this." She raised an eyebrow. "I found him." Her glass paused mid-pour. "The watcher." I nodded. She sat down slowly, wine forgotten. And I told her everything, about the alumni newsletter, the email, the meeting at the observatory. His name, his life, the promises he made, the regret he carried. Her face remained unreadable as I spoke, but I saw the way her hands tightened, then released, the way her eyes flicked away when I described the moment. "He said he held me once." She let me finish. Then, after a long pause, she said, "I always knew there was something else. I just didn't know what. Or who. I don't know what we're about to see," I said, unwrapping the camera. "But he said it was the last photos he ever took of me?" She nodded. "Then let's see them." I had borrowed an old projector and photo processing kit from a friend who worked at the university. We set everything up in the kitchen, lights dimmed, anticipation thick as fog. I cracked the camera open, removed the roll of film with shaking fingers, and loaded it into the processor. The smell of chemicals filled the air. Familiar, comforting in a strange way, like the scent of a dark room from someone else's memory. One by one, the images emerged. The first was of me, 10 years old, sitting on a swing in the park alone. The angle was distant, respectful. I remembered that day. I'd wandered off after an argument with my father. I thought no one had followed me. The second was of my sister, at her high school graduation. She was looking at the crowd, not the stage. I wondered now if she'd seen someone she didn't recognize at the time. A stranger with a camera. The third was of my mother, not posing, not smiling, just sitting in the garden, staring into space, hands deep in the soil. Her face was unreadable, somewhere between peace and pain. I felt a lump in my throat. The fourth changed everything. It was my father, not biological, Father. He was sitting at the kitchen table, holding one of the photos. Of me? Of Michael. And he was crying, not sobbing, not broken. Just one tear streaking down his cheek as he stared at the image. In the photo, he looked resolved, like a man who had seen the whole truth and chosen love anyway. Behind him, barely visible in the hallway, stood Michael, the watcher, watching again. But this time, not through glass, not through distance. He was inside, close. And Dad didn't seem surprised, didn't seem angry. He knew. All this time, I thought Dad was in the dark, that he had been fooled, sidelined, replaced, but he wasn't. He had known. Maybe not from the beginning, but eventually. And he had chosen silence. He had chosen me. He had chosen us. I fell into a chair, knees weak, vision swimming. My sister knelt beside me, holding the photo like it might shatter. "He let him in," she whispered. "He let him in." And that was when the next photo appeared. It was all of us, the only photo of its kind. Me, my sister, Mom, Dad, and in the very back, Michael. Not hiding, not watching, standing. Present, like he'd always belonged. It must have been staged. Maybe it was a one-time agreement, one last piece. But it existed. We had all stood in the same frame once. Proof that even the most broken, tangled, impossible families can find a moment to be whole. There were more photos after that. Scenes of our street, our mailbox, the trees in fall. As if he were saying goodbye, documenting the end of something sacred. And finally, the last image. It was of me, taken recently, maybe weeks ago. I was in my apartment, sitting at my desk, the original photo of me laughing as a child, framed above me. I hadn't noticed anyone there. But he had been, one last time, watching one final photograph. I stared at it for what felt like hours. I didn't ask how he got in. I didn't ask how he knew where I lived. I didn't need to. It was never about fear. It was never about intrusion. It was about presence. About a man who had loved silently and had finally stepped forward just far enough to say goodbye. My sister and I sat on the floor until dawn, sifting through the prints, the silence between us deeper and kinder than ever. We didn't need to say it aloud, but we both knew what it meant. We had two fathers, one who stayed and one who watched. Both had loved us in ways we may never fully understand, and maybe that was okay. Weeks later, I got one final envelope in the mail. No return address, just a small key inside and a note. "You found the pictures. I'm glad. But there's one last thing. Box 174, Union Street Storage. Yours now." I went the next day. The storage unit was small. Inside were shelves lined with photo albums, stacks of undeveloped film, notebooks, sketches, even recordings. He had chronicled everything. Not just me. My sister, my parents, our town. It was like a museum of our lives. Told from the edges, from the shadows. It was overwhelming. But at the very back was a leather-bound book titled simply, "Frame." Inside was one sentence written across the first page. "Every life is a photograph. Most people only see what's in the center. But sometimes, what matters most is just outside the frame." I closed the book and understood. Michael Anton had not been trying to steal my life. He had been trying to honor it. From afar, quietly, constantly. And in doing so, he had given me something no one else ever could: the whole picture. Not just the smiles, not just the pain, but the truth. And the truth, as it turns out, wasn't terrifying at all. It was love, complicated, incomplete, but real, the kind of love that doesn't always ask to be seen, just remembered. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe and like the video.